Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome to our newest special, Biden 47 years of failure. But we're also going to talk about President Trump coming up here. Let me start here. You've seen these videos before, surely. Both sides do it. And someone will go to a rally or somewhere, and they'll talk to a candidate's supporter and establish that this person loves the candidate, and then ask for an accomplishment. What's one thing that you agree that Hillary Clinton's done that you like, or one thing that you like that Trump's done, or whatever? And the person can't name one. And it makes them look like an idiot. It's a classic bit. Both sides do it. You've seen it a million times. I don't want you to be that person. And not that I think, someone's gonna come up and shove a camera in your face and do that, right? But I think everyone should be able to make the case for Trump to a friend or a family member. And everyone should be able to rattle off like 5 things President Trump has done with a relatively deep level of understanding to be able to back it up. Now, I'm not saying you got to agree with everything President Trump done, of course. And of course, there's things that you can disagree with or missed opportunities, obviously. But I will make 2 statements here. Trump has done a lot of good things in 4 years and things that he'll never get credit for. And he's done nothing that's worthy of the daily freaking out like he's Hitler incarnate, right? We talked last week in our last week's special, we just did a bunch of hoaxes that the media's talked about with Trump for the last 4 years. And like one of them was like, you put kids in cages, like he's rounding up kids and throwing them in cages. No, it's actually Obama's policies that did that. Trump ended it. So that being said, let's rattle off a couple things here in the next few minutes that I think Trump has done that are worthy of acknowledgement and recognition. Let's start with some things that you'd think the left would love. So the First Step Act is a big deal. Criminal justice reform, helping inmates get back to a normal life. This law also reformed mandatory minimums, which the left is very concerned about because anything that creates an unequal outcome is racist. And 90% of people who benefit from the reforms of the First Steps Act are black, 90%. It also expands the discretion of judges when sentencing nonviolent criminals. That's great. The New York Times has even admitted that this fact is true, that poverty rates for Black and Hispanic Americans were at their lowest levels ever before the pandemic. I didn't want to focus too much on economic numbers because they're very easily manipulated. But the New York Times is claiming that these are true. Black, Hispanic, Asian unemployment numbers were at all-time lows. Women unemployment rate at a 65-year low. Youth unemployment at a 50-year low. 400,000 new manufacturing jobs since the election. There was a survey done in 2018 that found 95% of manufacturers were optimistic about the future. That's the highest ever. 95% were optimistic about the future. Now, that was pre-pandemic, but surely will return. Do you remember the pledge that Trump made that he will, for every new federal regulation, he'll cut 2? Turns out for every new federal regulation, they've cut 8. The president also started these opportunity zones at about just under 9,000 communities across the country. It's like 8,764, so the communities across the country. So this is a tax cut if you invest in a particularly blighted area of town. Senator Tim Scott is a big supporter of these, and I think that's a good thing. He signed welfare reform that requires, this is important, able-bodied adults who don't have children to look for work while they're on welfare. Now, remember, he was attacked for ripping welfare from the arms of nursing mothers. No, it's specifically able-bodied adults who don't have children. Now, when it comes to children, he signed a bill that gives $2.4 billion of funding increase to the Child Care and Development Fund. Now, the New York Times, every time there was like a bill that the president signed, the New York Times would be like, oh, well, Congress should really get the credit for passing it. It's like, well, yeah, sure. Like, that's how that works. But he signed it. And you're making him out to be a terrible, awful person. And he now has signed a total of $8.1 billion to states to fund childcare for low-income families. Hitler! When it comes to medicine, he's signed a bill allowing some drug imports from Canada that would be cheaper, signed an executive order forcing healthcare providers to publicize their prices. He signed a right to try bill to allow terminally ill patients to try new medication. That's a huge deal. I don't just want to flow through that one, although we got to keep moving here. But that is a big, big deal for a lot of people, life or death. $9 billion to fight opioid abuse. He created a VA hotline. I mean, we got to go back to 2016 to remember how much the VA was in the news and the problems of the VA. I haven't heard anything about it since. He created a VA hotline to help veterans, staffed by veterans and their family members. 4,000 VA employees have been removed or suspended or demoted for poor performance. When's the last time you've ever heard of a federal employee being demoted or fired? Trump signed in a 12 weeks of paid parental leave for federal workers. Again, these are things that the left would love, right? Like, if Obama did these things, the left would love them. He signed the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act. I mean, come on, progressives. Come on, animal rights people. Trump's saving puppies. What's the problem here? For being called a bigot nonstop every day, Trump's appointed 5 openly gay ambassadors. Rick Grinnell, he was the ambassador to Germany. He led an initiative to decriminalize homosexuality around the world. Since then, he's brokered a peace deal between Kosovo and Serbia, which was a huge deal. You remember he attacked the media at a press conference because they weren't asking him any real questions about this incredibly huge deal. Homeland Security has arrested, it was a little over 1,500, I think it's 1,588 people associated with human trafficking. That's a lot of lives saved right there. We can talk foreign policy, which we'll do in more detail coming up, but ISIS has lost almost all of its territory. No one talks about ISIS anymore. Al-Baghdadi was killed, the head of ISIS. Soleimani was killed. He was the Iranian general who was responsible for the death of many Americans, right? The Iranians have directly helped terrorist groups that have killed Americans, and we just took out Soleimani. Remember that missile just dropped on his head when he was in, I believe it was Iraq? These peace deals between Israel and Bahrain and UAE are huge. And hopefully just the first of many dominoes to fall towards peace in the stinking Middle East, which, by the way, this method of doing it, John Kerry in 2016 said was impossible to accomplish this way. It was impossible. And Trump and Jared Kushner have done it exactly the way that John Kerry said it is impossible to be done. Trump's convinced countries to increase their funding for NATO, finally. He created the Space Force. He withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords. He stopped funding the WHO until they get out of bed with China. Since 2018, the U.S. passed Russia and Saudi Arabia as the world's largest producer of oil. This energy independence has removed a ton of leverage from these countries that they used to have over us. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. We were told again that would spark war, led to peace. He's appointed 194 judges across the country out of 792, so it's 24% of the total judges. And of course, the 3, hopefully third, but the 3 Supreme Court justices. Remember, there were a lot of people in 2016 who weren't so sure about this Trump guy, right? Like maybe he's really a New York City liberal in disguise. I don't know, but I don't like him. I don't like his attitude, but he's better than Hillary, and we at least have to get Supreme Court justices in there. And Trump is gonna nominate 3, that's incredible. If nothing else, mission accomplished there alone. That's a pretty good 4 years. 4 years is fast. I'm sure I'm missing a ton of things. If anything, any accomplishments to you stand out that I've missed here, please include it in the comments and let me know, and we'll add it to the list. For me, the big ones, right? If someone's like, why are you supporting President Trump policy-wise? It would be not starting any new wars, bringing guys home. Our economy was humming, tax cuts, the Supreme Court justices, and I'll throw in there this push just recently against critical race theory in federal departments and in our education system. I think those are great. I also challenge progressives to give me one thing that the president's done, not that you disagree with, right? Because you're always gonna have policy disagreements, but one thing the president's done that you think is deserving of the fear and panic that the left has been stoking these last 4 years. I remember when he was elected, we were told that he was going to round up the Muslims and put them in internment camps. And everyone's fearing for their lives because President Trump is gonna murder total absolute freak out, and it's kept that pace for 4 years. Of course you're gonna disagree with some policies, right? But has he really done anything that bad? Now that's not my argument for Trump. Well, it hasn't been that bad. My argument for Trump is that it's been very good. But from your perspective, is anything really that bad coming from President Trump that has justified all of this the last 4 years? And don't give me anything about COVID. I remember being told 1.2 million Americans would die. So by that standard, he's done a miraculous job. Maybe the thing I think missed opportunity still is we still have a Department of Education. But I'll give him 4 more years to get rid of that. Coming up next, we're going to talk in greater detail about some domestic victories. Then we'll talk about foreign policy. And then we'll do an overview of what Joe Biden has done for the last 47 years in Washington, D.C. He's been in D.C. for 1/5 of the entire existence of the U.S. Constitution. That's all coming up on our special. Glad you're here. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special. We're going to focus on domestic policy in this segment right here. We're going to do that with Joel Griffith. He is a senior fellow a research fellow at the Roe Institute at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Griffith, how are you, brother?
Hey, pretty well. Thanks for having me this morning.
Good to talk to you. So I'll just throw it to you. Top of your head, what's one of the best things that you think Trump has been able to accomplish in the last 4 years?
Well, we saw the biggest tax reform package, the most substantial tax reform package in most of our lifetimes. You'd have to go back to 1986 to see anything more substantial than what we saw. Prior to that tax cut package, we had really some of the highest business tax rates in the industrialized world. And that was really a deterrent to long-term growth and long-term investment. And that's exactly, we need those investment dollars. We need to incentivize that if we want to see long-term productivity growth, because that's what actually fuels our standard of living increasing across the board on all income levels. It was a tough process to get that package through. It took a solid year, that first year of the Trump administration, to get it passed. But in the end, it was passed. And that really has been a boon to our economy. We saw a continuation and acceleration of economic growth. We saw unemployment hit lows that we haven't seen in decades. And I think that's left us with a far firmer economic foundation coming out of this COVID shutdown than we would have had otherwise.
Yeah. Obviously there's a ton of aspects of this bill, but what's maybe 1 or 2 specific aspects of the tax package that were most helpful, you think?
I think that perhaps most helpful was a lowering of the corporate tax rate. If you would add on the federal business tax rate to what some of the states have, we were definitely in the lead, in a very bad way, in the lead in the industrialized world. And over the last few decades, we've seen other parts of the world and our competitors lower those rates on business income, because they recognize that it's not just that the income goes into the hands of the owners. Of course, that's part of it with dividends. But a lot of those funds are actually reinvested into the company or reinvested into other business ventures. So when you go ahead and siphon up those dollars and put them into the hands of the government, you see those dollars spent instead of invested. We need to spur investment. And that's what that tax cut package did.
I distinctly remember, now that you bring it up, when it passed, I remember the big press conference, and right afterwards, I remember companies just sending out immediately what they're going to do with this money, right? And we're gonna put all this money here. We're going to give everyone this much of a raise. I remember all these utility companies coming out and saying we're dropping utility rates. Just immediately, that was done. And I'm sure that was only a fraction of what we really heard about. Give me something else. Go ahead and give me another good thing that Trump you think has done.
Prior to President Trump coming into office, our nation joined the Paris Climate Accords. And that was an attempt to limit carbon emissions across the globe. But what it would have done if fully implemented in the United States, it would have forced us into an energy program similar to what Germany has endured. And a lot of times we only hear the highlights, the pluses of what Europe has tried to do with renewable energy, but people fail to understand that energy costs in much of Europe, including Germany, are far higher, not just 10, 20% higher, but if you go to places like Germany, you're going to be paying 2 or 3 times higher electricity bills. And that's not just a harm to consumers. It doesn't just mean that your air conditioning or your heat in the winter is going to be more expensive. Electricity is very important to the manufacturing center, to the economy in general. Industrial use of energy, that's a big component. That's a big cost driver in our economy. So when you increase the costs of that energy production, even if your intentions are good, the fact is you hamper economic growth and you hamper the economic well-being of all income classes. If you look at disposable income, for instance, in Germany, I'm picking on them because they have had this big green energy push over the last few decades. Disposable income in Germany is about $10,000 plus, $10,000 less per family on average than it is in the United States. And a big cost driver of that are the far higher electricity costs. So that's another big accomplishment by the Trump administration is pulling us out of those Paris Accords and allowing the energy renaissance to continue.
Forgot about that one. What was it in particular about the Paris Accord that would have made us bound to that? Or was it more of just an ideological direction?
Well, it was ideological underpinnings, but there would have been real world consequences. It would have made us limit our carbon emissions even further than we already have. And to do that, that would have required either government mandates or it would have been, or it could have been done through something like a carbon tax, which would have been less transparent, but would have accomplished the same goal, which would be moving us into a direction of lower emissions. And what politicians fail to do when they're touting these plans, they usually highlight the visible jobs that are going to be created by directing dollars towards the green energy industry, or they'll highlight that, but they're not going to tell you what the net economic loss is going to be. Because for every job that's created in the government subsidized sector, there's going to be a number of jobs lost in other parts of the economy, and that's in addition to the higher costs that we're going to pay on everything from our vacation flights to our vehicles to our heating and air conditioning.
Amazing. And that's someone who, that's true. And then someone who lives in California, we can tell you the energy policy here in California is a fraction of what they have in Europe, and it would have been nationwide, as you said, without this Paris thing, where we don't even have electricity. They turn it off most of the time, and it's by far the most expensive in the country as it is. What's and I forgot about this one too. I'm so grateful you're here, Joel. Did he just unilaterally just be like, I'm out? Because I remember all the freak out, right? I remember everyone being like, oh, the planet's gonna burst into flames now but did he just do it himself?
Because this was not a treaty ratified by the United States Senate, the president had that power. President Obama entered into that accord without going through the treaty process. And so that meant that President Trump could exit it without the Senate agreement.
Very good. Okay, give me something about the SEC you mentioned before we came on the air. I don't understand it at all. What's going on?
So this is something that doesn't often get a lot of attention, but the Securities and Exchange Commission regulates the investment markets, the investment world. If you're a typical investor, you probably have a 401k or an IRA or an investment account where you can buy and sell mutual funds and individual stocks. But there's a lot of other investments that you might not have access to if you're not what's called an accredited investor, if you're not of a certain net worth typically or income level. And so those are a lot of investments that you see in pre-IPOs, companies that are just that aren't yet public, but yet they are raising enormous amounts of money. Think about Uber and Lyft. There were big institutional owners and hedge fund owners of those companies before they went public, and then they went public, and you'd see that share price not just skyrocket on that first day, but that was often, even at the initial day of the IPO, that would be at a multiple of where these private equity funds would be able to enter. Those deals, those opportunities typically aren't available to average investors. So what we've seen recently, you've seen the Securities and Exchange Commission begin to broaden the definition of who these accredited investors are, and they're broadening it beyond just those who have money or income, and they're beginning to expand it to also include those individuals who are informed enough, according to the SEC, to make those decisions. Now, we think it should be broader. We think that more people should have access to it than even beyond what the SEC has begun to, beyond what the SEC is doing now, but it's a start. It's a positive direction, and I think that as we go forward into the future, you're going to see more of those investment opportunities open up to members of the individual public before these companies go public on the stock exchanges.
Love it. Can you trace that back to President Trump, or would you say that's like just a more pro-business ideology from the right in general?
President Trump, the administration has been, I would say, supportive of this. You have commissioners on the SEC that are appointed by presidents, and so there's the SEC is more of a bipartisan, pragmatic entity than some other government than the standard government agencies are. But there is some ideological bent on that. And we've seen the ones that are more free market oriented. We've seen them on the whole be more open to expanding access to these capital markets to the broader population.
Listen, and I would definitely make the argument that you're not just voting for president, you're voting for an entire middle bureaucracy when you vote for president. As you mentioned, the president nominates and puts up all these people to run these organizations. So there's big ramifications across the board. I got about 2 minutes, and I got two questions. Give me something that you maybe either disagree that the president has done that you think has not been good, or something you wish he got done / could get done in the next term.
Well, if you look at the size of our government, we have been spending ourselves into oblivion for years now. This isn't just on just during President Trump's tenure, of course. This has been through Republican and Democratic administrations, but it's been getting worse now, really going back the last 10 years, going back to the last economic crisis especially. And I know a lot of folks want to just put the blame on the fact that we're in the middle of an economic crisis and we're in the middle of economic shutdowns. But we were on track to have $1 trillion plus deficits into the foreseeable future, even before this crisis hit. So this is not just COVID's fault. It's not just President Trump's fault, but Congress passes the budget, the president signs the budget. And the fact is these budgets are digging ourselves into a hole. It's generational theft, the fact that politicians aren't addressing these problems. And it means that we are longer term. This is going to be a drag on economic growth. And we could see other consequences as well. We have the Federal Reserve that buys up a lot of this government debt now. Basically, that means they're printing money and buys the debt. The money goes into circulation in the economy. And there could be economic consequences from that as well, including into the future.
Of course there will be. Yeah, really well said. I hope the president can show some leadership on that in this next term here, if he gets it. Real quick, 30 seconds, a good or bad thing about Joe Biden's last 47 years.
Wow. Well, back years ago, Senator Biden, to my knowledge, did support some free trade agreements. Now, he is backtracking on some of that now. I think he made some remarks the other day that he would be supportive of using tariffs more often than has been done in the past. That would be a negative. But in the past, he at least voiced support for some free trade agreements. I hope he sticks with that.
I'll take it. Joel Griffith, Roe Institute Heritage Foundation. Joel, thanks for your insight, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Beautiful. Let's come back next, and we'll do some foreign policy focus now on our latest special. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special. Joe Biden, 47 years of failure. We're going to talk specifically about Joe Biden coming up in the next segment, but right now I want to talk about Trump and his foreign policy accomplishments and maybe missed opportunities. We'll see where the conversation goes. Brandon Weichert is here. He is the author of Winning Space, How America Remains a Superpower. Brandon, how are you, brother?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Man, good to talk to you. So let's talk, as you mentioned, the four big threats to America, how Trump has done handling each of those. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's just start around the world. We'll start, first of all, by noting that everyone in 2016, everyone said, don't expect Trump to be very good on foreign policy. He's going to be an isolationist. He's going to hate alliances. He's going to undo America's position in the world. And as we've seen, he's done just the opposite. So the four big threats that we're facing at sort of a geopolitical level, setting aside terrorism and maybe the failed state of Venezuela, and just focusing on kind of the big four, that's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. On all of them, the president has acted very decisively to not only defend American interests, but also to avoid getting sucked into sort of meaningless, open-ended wars in the way that his predecessors, both Obama and Bush, did. He strengthened NATO. He's forced NATO the members to start paying more for their national defenses so that they would bolster the NATO alliance and, resist Russian aggression a lot better. Another thing that he's done is he's getting all of the Sunni Arab states to recognize the existence of Israel and to basically end the decades-long, Israeli-Arab war that's gone on since Israel became an independent country. And that is good because that's the first formulations of a sort of a pan-regional Israeli-Sunni Arab alliance aimed at the heart of Iran, which, of course, is probably the biggest rogue nuclear threat we face. And then, of course, his pivot to China has been infinitely more successful than President Obama's much ballyhooed pivot was, in that the President Trump has been able to get our Asian allies to come on board and basically form, if not officially, certainly informally, the Quad Alliance, which is the United States, Australia, India, Japan, as well as other actors like Vietnam and even the Philippines and Taiwan, and even South Korea to a point, to kind of bracket China's rise as China's becoming more aggressive. And lastly, the president, and this is where I think the president has probably been somewhat weak, the president has attempted to engage North Korea in a way directly that no president probably since the 50s has tried. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. But this president has acted in an incredible degree of alacrity in ways that we were told he could not act, and he's had a lot of success.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to sit on the one thing. I want to make sure this is a true statement. The no new wars. That's pretty amazing in light of where we've been since 2001, right? So is that a true statement? I mean, we killed Soleimani and al-Baghdadi, right? But is it true we've had no new wars?
We haven't really had any new wars. I mean, look, we are starting to draw down in Iraq. We're starting to draw down in Afghanistan. Where we've been in Syria, I think we have now the smallest number of troops that we've had since the Syrian civil war began operating in Syria. We're protecting oil interests in Syria, which the president has consistently said he wants to protect since the campaign in 2016, because he wants us to recoup some of our financial losses from all these decades of being involved in pointless Middle East wars. And so we've not invaded Syria the way we invaded Iraq. We've not attacked Yemen the way that we attacked Afghanistan. We're not getting sucked in the way that we were in 2001 and beyond. And, the thing about Afghanistan is obviously after 9/11, we had to go in. But it was around spring 2002 when we started making Afghanistan into this sort of nation-building endeavor, trying to make Afghanistan into Arizona. And that's where things went off the rails. And the president has been pretty consistent that he's not going, no matter what happens, he's not going to try, for instance, to make Syria, into South Dakota or, Iran into Idaho. It's not going to happen. Whatever happens, we're not getting sucked in the way that we were. And he's been very consistent in this.
Do you find that to be a purposeful, ideological, and policy decision by the president? Or is it simply, I'm going to do the opposite of what Obama did?
I think it's both. We know this president is not ideological, and that's one of, I think, his greatest strengths. He's a little bit more flexible than either George W. Bush or Barack Obama were. But I do think that he has been pretty consistent since. Actually, I remember in 2004, he was interviewed by Neil Cavuto, and he was demanding that President George W. Bush at the time bring the troops home. We've already done everything we can there. Why is the Bush administration wasting time and lives and money on an effort that we can't win? And just declare victory, pack up and come home and see what happens. That tends to be the Trumpian kind of idea. And he's implementing it. So it is ideological, but it is also, I think, because he knows that's what the opposite of what his previous presidents did. And he's going to do the opposite of them.
It hasn't worked. So Iran Iran is clear to me, right? So, as you mentioned, like Israel and this Sunni Arab, Bahrain and UAE right now, hopefully others to come with, around Iran, against Iran. That's awesome.
Right.
North Korea, again, remains to be seen, but I mean, we've seen talks more than we've ever had before. We could maybe spend some more time on China. We only got a few minutes. But what's interesting to me is still, I hear this attack on Trump that he's like pro-Putin or Putin's puppet or whatever. And it's like, hold on. No, like what are the things that Trump's done that Putin would not have liked?
Well, let's just look in my area of space. We are now with Space Force. The reason that we created Space Force largely was because since 2013, the Russians in particular have been seeding the orbits with these offensive co-orbital satellites, which are tiny satellites that tailgate our satellites, and they can push our satellites out of orbit in like a space Pearl Harbor moment, and that would render our forces deaf, dumb, and blind operating on Earth, and that would allow, believably, Russia to invade Eastern Europe without much pushback from the United States and NATO. And so we've created Space Force, and that's a direct dagger aimed at the heart of Russia's military modernization, which is supposed to keep the Americans back. Another thing that the President Trump has done has been yesterday, the State Department announced that it will not recognize Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko as the legitimate president of Belarus anymore. Belarus is akin to how we view Cuba or Canada for the Russians. The Russians need Belarus as a friendly neighbor. And now that we're not going to recognize the embattled autocrat Lukashenko, that's a huge hit to the Russian geopolitical agenda for driving into Eastern Europe. Another thing that we've done is, for years now under Trump, we've been arming the Ukrainians. We've been giving them lethal aid. This was something that even Obama would not do. And so the very idea that the President Trump is some kind of Russian stooge, he's the worst Russian stooge ever. I mean,
it's amazing.
The
How
reality
interesting.
is very different.
Okay, we got less than 2 minutes. Give me one missed opportunity and something that Joe Biden, or even big picture, how Joe Biden would be ideologically different from the president's foreign policy.
So I'm going to answer the second question first. The second question is it's sort of like a college football coach. When you get a new college football coach, you got to give that coach 2 to 3 years to really institute his program. And so if Biden were to win, he's going to have a lot of sort of continuity, at least the first couple of years, I think, foreign policy wise, with the Trump administration, because Trump has gotten so much done in 4 years. And so you're going to have to wait really 2 years to see how the reset happens with Biden. But you can beware that Biden will attempt to reset relations with China. He will get, I think, even more aggressive with Russia at the expense of getting tougher on China, which China is the bigger threat. And I think that the Iran nuclear deal that Obama negotiated will be brought back to life. In terms of the other question, I think that the missed opportunity probably going to be North Korea. I don't think we're going to be able to get a deal with North Korea. I'm happy the president tried something new. It certainly made him look like a more rational leader than who he was up against. He certainly defied the expectation, but I do think we need to prepare for some serious problems on the Korean Peninsula.
All fair. So it sounds all in all, you think the president's done a what kind of job foreign policy-wise?
I'd say he's done a 10 out of 10 job. This was the one area we all would believe he was going to be weak on, and he has defied expectations.
What's the line that there's like these polls every once in a while, they're like, oh, foreigners have like a low, it's not even approval rating, it's like a view of America is like lower than ever or whatever. I forget the poll they always put out there. But like, does that matter at all? / is that true?
No, well, it's probably true because of the last 20 years of U.S. foreign policy so unpopular. It doesn't matter, though. I mean, ultimately, do you think China cares? I mean, do they care if people like their foreign policy? Foreign policy it's America first. You put your country's interests first, and that's going to, annoy some people who aren't American. Oh, well, the president has done things that will further our foreign policy objectives beyond anything that his last 4 predecessors have done.
That's good. Winning space, how America remains a superpower. And Brandon, we still got to take some time just to specifically talk about the book, but I'm glad you mentioned all that Russian satellite stuff. That's wild. Winning space, Brandon Weichert, Weichert. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Robbie Suave coming up next from Reason. We're going to give Joe Biden a fair shake here. Talk about some potentially good things that Biden's done in 47 years. He's had to have done something good. And then some not so good things. All coming up. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Joe Biden, 47 years of failure. Look at that. 47 years. He's been in D.C. for 1/5 of the entire existence of the United States Constitution. What? Robbie Suave is here, senior editor at Reason. Robbie, he's had plenty of time to do some good things. Can you give me a couple here?
It's been a long time for him in office.
Right.
I think actually probably the most admirable thing about Joe Biden is that it sounds like what we hear from officials in the Obama administration is that he was the more sane voice on foreign policy within the Obama White House, dueling with the kind of Hillary Clinton vision that we should be always and everywhere intervening. It sounds like Biden was the one who was more skeptical of the escalations the Obama administration considered and then implemented in places like Libya, considered in Syria. I think Biden's foreign policy vision was a lot more realistic than what Secretary Clinton and what Barack Obama got maybe talked into by her. And that counts for something. Obviously, I wish he'd been more successful at winning that argument with the secretary, with others in the administration. But given how important, how consequential, how much it matters what the president's foreign policy is, because they're really completely unrestricted in implementing it. Congress is not exercising any oversight role whatsoever in that regard. Sadly, unfortunately, that's not a significant thing.
Yeah, that's really important you say that last point. You're right. It's okay. For that reason, it's worth taking a little more time on that, because this is a really important thing. I heard him the other day, he was asked if China's I forget what the word, like adversary or something, and he said, no, they're a competitor. So I think maybe we can, there's big picture foreign policy stuff, and then there's more like the littler actions around the world. So does that make sense? Does that distinction make sense? So
yeah.
It seems like you were more speaking of the smaller, let's send a bunch of people to Syria, let's send a bunch of people here, a bunch of people there, a bunch of people there kind of thing. So is that the type of thing that he's a little more hands-on or a little more let's not engaged in?
Yeah, I with respect to Middle East policy, it looks like he more quickly caught on than others that nation building and regime change are not going to go necessarily the way the U.S. wanted them to. With China, it's a little bit of a different issue. Obviously, he's been knocked for being, I guess, soft on China, which I think is a fair criticism to some degree. Then again, empty kind of saber rattling and empty tough talk isn't really going to do anything to solve our China dilemma anyway. So I'm not so sure that I'm bothered that he would describe them as a competitor. Rather, I mean, being tough on China in a smart way is important, in a way that's substantive and actually matters. Just kind of provoking or escalating the rhetoric isn't really going to get the job done. So while obviously he's going to have to answer for some of his softness toward China, do you know what I'm saying? It's not.
Totally
competitor language might be just fine with me. They are a competitor,
Makes sense.
and we should not want to escalate hostilities in a way that doesn't help us at all.
Fair. Another thing. Do you have anything else? I mean, there has to be something else. Joe Biden's done good in 47 years.
Well, I'm trying to look at big picture things. Obviously, there are plenty of things that are fine or not fine about his record, but he's a part of the old school conciliatory approach where you actually do talk to people on the others. He's been defiantly proud of having, reached deals and compromises in the Senate with Republicans. With long ago figures who are now reviled in history because they're problematic on sort of racial issues. Strom Thurmond is one he's talked about, and I think that actually is admirable. This is what the Congress is supposed to do, right? They're supposed to work through issues. They're supposed to come to compromises. He is part of that model, at least he was, and is in that way a voice for moderation at a time where our country desperately needs it if we have any hope of not fixing, but even slightly healing the horrible tribal partisan environment we live in. And he is a figure of that, and that would be a tremendous good.
Yeah, so the question is, how much would he be influenced by Kamala and or just the Democratic Party of the day?
Right, but I think he, more than any other candidate who is seeking Democratic office. I mean, you're asking me to make the best case for him. This is the best case I can make. He, more than any other person who is seeking the nomination, genuinely can denounce the extremists in the party, Antifa, the Democratic Socialists, et cetera. He's been pretty clear. It's genuine when he says it, that he's not a socialist, that he doesn't want any of this rioting. I mean, it's truly genuine. And in a way that virtually no other Democrat can speak to.
Yep. All right, let's take some time here and talk about some of the things that you're not super excited about with Joe Biden.
Sure. I'm not super excited about his kind of everything in the kitchen sink approach to policy, I mean, we can start with COVID. Does he want a national mask mandate? Does he think a national mask mandate, does he think there's authority in the Constitution to do that? I don't think there is. He doesn't speak in a way anymore that sort of captures the nuance of policy. So I'm not sure he just want state governors to do that. It's very confused. He's not very good at communicating those kinds of things anymore. I hate his sort of hypocrisy, an issue I write about a lot. This is kind of maybe a small thing compared to other things, but I read a lot about sexual misconduct adjudication on college campuses, the Me Too movement, et cetera. Joe Biden, more than any figure in the Obama administration, was for tougher, more unfair, more due process-free procedures on college campuses. Yes. He's vowed to undo Title IX reforms on day one, despite himself kind of having benefited from the presumption of innocence afforded the accused, the possibly wrongfully accused. Not, he was accused, and it was long ago, and I don't know that I believe it whatsoever. But people deserve the benefit of the doubt. He benefits from that. He doesn't believe young men deserve the same, and I think that's pretty hypocritical.
Yeah, well, he was the one. And what was the claim? I forget. It was 1/5. He made it was either 1/5 or 2/5 of women are raped on college campuses. Like he was the guy in charge of the task force. Was it 1/4? And it's like, holy cow! Like if that were true, which clearly it's not, that'd be like it's like Somalia, dropping your kid off of college, your daughter, especially like no right-thinking father would ever drop their daughter off of college. A quarter of them are being raped all the time. So yeah, he was definitely the leader of that movement, which was absurd. Give me one more thing. You did good there, but give me another one that you're concerned about. I haven't thought of that one.
That I'm concerned about Biden. I mean, I am concerned that he will totally fail to stop the kind of radicalization of the party. I mean, on economic issues, on regulation, on all that stuff, you're going to get a typical Democrat and then some. I'm worried he would just compromise the economy in all sorts of in the ways Democratic administrations often do. Compromise an already ailing economy because it would be a very, very unfriendly business class, and that's a worrisome thing.
Yeah, so he would be for higher taxes and all that economic stuff.
And then all the little ways that regulatory boards can eat away at businesses that are not, big headline grabbing things. They're difficult to explain. They're small issues, all that stuff that is generally better under, I think, Republican administrations. And also there will be people, not Biden himself, but people behind him angling to push the party further to the left that really have a lot of contempt for small businesses, for businesses of any size, really. And that hurts workers, that hurts consumers, that hurts all of us at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do you have any insider feeling into what role Kamala would have moving forward, whether that's just Biden as a person or Biden's old age or Kamala's ambition, or how do you think that dynamic would work if they were to win?
I mean, certainly Kamala will be, the front runner to be the next president of the United States, whenever Biden is finished being president, if he were to be elected. It's interesting because she actually comes from the background of a prosecutor. She's a cop. So it's so funny that, she was kind of picked because at this moment of kind of racial equality or police misconduct that we're focused on, there was, I think, a need to have a woman of color on the ticket. But of course, her background was in pushing some, not all of them, but some of the law enforcement policies that the progressive left is really upset about right now. I think she's something of a chameleon. I think she doesn't really stand for anything, and she will come to represent whatever is politically necessary. So I don't see her being, I don't think like the radicalism radiates from her. But if it will be politically advantageous for her to adopt to push in a more progressive direction, or to be the voice or the spokesperson for progressive policies, I think she will very much embody that role.
Yeah, very fair. I wonder if, I've always wondered, let's see if you get any insight. I want to get more insight in, I wonder if we'll ever know what really happened 4 years ago, why Biden didn't run in 2016. And how that happened behind the scenes, and what Obama's role in was that. Because I'm sure Biden's kicking himself that he didn't run 4 years ago, no?
Oh, absolutely. I think it was a kind of a party decision. It was an insider, elites within the Democratic Party. It was just clear Hillary wanted this so badly. She was going to run. And if you were going to run against her, that's fine, but she was going to fight and fight and fight, and there was nothing going to be standing in her way. And I think Biden probably decided, you know what, she wants us so badly. This is going to be unpleasant to contest her here. She felt like she was robbed of it last time. So I think they just thought there was not really a lot, and that all the support from the party was going to be support for her. So it was going to be too exhausting to contest her. And I think if they knew that she was going to lose, obviously Biden would have fought her for it. But the expert consensus was just so in her favor to get the nomination and to win the presidency that it didn't seem worth it.
That's so wild. I just feel like 4 years ago, Biden would have been totally different than 2020 Biden.
Oh, absolutely.
He was like way more like on fire all the time.
So much more personality. He's so much better spoken. I don't agree. People say, oh, he's declined so dramatically mentally. I'm not sure that's true. But what he has gotten, he's less communicative. He doesn't get his ideas across as concisely and with as much rhetorical flourish. And that's what hurts him in these debates. I mean, he was terrible in the Democratic primary debates. He was awful. He was the worst candidate on stage by far. Didn't matter. He still got the nomination easily. So maybe that, maybe that's a sign of things to come. But certainly,
maybe. We got to run here. Does Robbie Suave go on the record with any prediction on what's going to happen in the election?
I am predicting that Biden will win. I think.
No kidding.
That's his favorite.
You know what? I did see some hypothetical maps that you drew up. The 27 to win.
Like
I did see that on
290
your
to
Twitter.
240. Yeah, that's my prediction.
Wow, there you go. Very good. Robbie Suave, appreciate you, brother. Robbie, S-O-A-V-E on the Twitter, senior editor at Reason. Thanks, Robbie. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Very good. There you go. We got overview of Trump's domestic, overview of Trump's foreign, and then a little back and forth on Biden. We'll see. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.